Hey friends, Rolf here again, Louisville ProActivist Report. Thank you for joining me today. You know what to do: like, share, comment, help spread the word here. It's election time. Got another great candidate with me today. Today I have Robert LeVertis Bell. He is running for Louisville Metro Council in District 4 as a Democrat. So thanks for coming on the show today. Great to have you on. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your connection to the community and everything, and what brought you to this point of running for city council.
All right, yeah, thanks for having me on. So basically, like he said, my name is Robert LeVertis Bell. I am about 40. I'm 40 years old. I just turned 40. And so
happy birthday, man.
Thank you very much. That was last week.
All right.
I've been a community activist for a couple of decades now, neighborhood activist. I've been vice president of Neighborhood Association, of Shelby Park Neighborhood Association. I've been an activist in various organizations over the past 20 or so years. I originally started with an organization called The Brick House with Brat Magazine. That was as a teen. Moving on to working with Citizens Against Police Abuse as a younger adult. I've done a lot of different work, a lot of different organizations. Currently, I'm involved in Democratic Socialists of America, the Louisville chapter of that, and I've been just trying to make the city a stronger place for a really long time. And so when the opportunity came up, when the incumbent or the person who currently has the seat in this race, the 4th District race, decided she wasn't going to run, several people asked me if I would like to take that spot, if I'd like to run for it, and I could not come up with a good reason to say no. Every time I tried, I thought, maybe it's not the best time in my life, maybe, whatever. But it seemed to make the most sense to me that this is a time for bold ideas, a time for really trying to transform the city. And though I never intended to be a politician, never thought that electoral politics was really my lane as far as how I can help the community, it seems like this is the right call to make. I'm a teacher. I've been involved in teacher activism for a few years, so a lot of people hear that and they want to talk about the schools. Okay, I've been a neighborhood activist for a very long time. People to hear that and they want to talk about housing, and so it just made sense that people were looking to me as someone in the community who might be able to make a difference in this particular spot, and that's why I'm running in this race.
Awesome. So yeah, I see, you've been a teacher, you're obviously a guy that likes to share knowledge, organizer, same thing there. It's all about spreading awareness and then, hopefully turning that awareness into action. So one thing that's big on my show is always inspiration. I want to see what inspires people and hopefully inspire the people who are watching. So, people can do a lot of things with their life. You don't have to work for the community. You don't have to organize, be a teacher. So going back to the beginning, what kind of inspired you to go that route?
Well, what inspired me? So my grandmother, her name is Maddie Jones. She is a prominent civil rights activist around here, a bit of a legend, if I have to say that. And so growing up in her household, or around her, her house at the corner of 34th and River Park is sort of still the place I consider to be home. Growing up with her, with Reverend Lewis Coleman around, with people like Ann Braden around, there was no escaping the idea that people should be out in the world doing whatever they can do to make the world a better place. And I attended church with Ann Braden growing up, and that was actually something I did sort of outside of my family. But so I got to develop my own relationship with Ann as I was a teenager. Ann Braden, for people who don't know, she is just she's deceased, but she was a pioneer in civil rights and being a leftist civil rights activist in the South, anti-segregation activist in the South. She was involved in the Southern Organizing Committee and just did a lot of really incredible work. And so, one story that I like to tell is one time we took a church trip down to the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and I must have been maybe 13 years old, but it was me and Ann Braden in a car with one other person. And we went to the museum, and as we were walking through the museum, as she was sort of telling me stories about the movement, we kept running across pictures of her and her husband Carl, with names and faces that were familiar to me, and that to me was sort of that was an inspiration. Seeing her as a person who was living history. and feeling like, it wasn't just these, names that I might have heard before, or, famous activists over the years who had made changes in the world, but it was people who, I could sort of relate to on a day-to-day basis, normal people who were doing extraordinary things. And so it made me feel like I could do some pretty cool things, or pretty interesting things, or pretty useful things for the community.
Nice. So it sounds like it's kind of ingrained in you. You've got a long bloodline of activists.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Well, that's nice, man. I like that. That's a worthy thing to continue. So yeah, awesome.
I hope so. I hope I can, live up to these people's. We're all the servers of giants, right? And these are the giants of my life, and among others.
Yeah, well, don't try to live up to them. Just do you.
Well, yeah.
Just do Robert LeVertis Bell, man.
Absolutely.
You'll be fine.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So let's talk about District 4 a little bit.
Okay.
Starting off, what all communities are in District 4?
Okay, District 4, it's a massive community. So to be clear, it was during the city-county merger, District 4 was one of the districts that was created in order to be a majority black district as part of the merger. And so when you look at the district lines, it's a little fishy or unusual because of that reason. The lines are sort of drawn to be a mostly black region, mostly black district. So, but it's, at this point, we're not actually sure what the current census is even going to say regarding that. So the district lines are definitely going to be redrawn based on that. So right now, Shelby Park, Smoketown, parts of Centralburg, parts of the original Highlands, Parristown Point, Irish Hill, Phoenix Hill, Butchertown, Nulu, all of downtown, all of Russell, East Portland. I think that's it. A little bit of California. It's a big area.
I think there's a town in Alaska that might be included in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a large district, and that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to represent. So
yeah. And it's very diverse. So, like I said, it was drawn to be a majority black district. At this point, with so much change happening in so many of those neighborhoods, we're not actually sure if it's a mostly black district or not anymore. But it's an incredibly diverse district. Shelby Park, my neighborhood where I've lived for the past several years, has changed a lot in the past 5 years. I know Butchertown, Nulu. Nulu didn't even exist last time there was a census, really, as such. So there's a lot of different communities, a lot of different stakeholders, and it's incredibly diverse. And I think as districts go, it's probably among the most diverse ideologically, demographically, etc. So, and I think we, as a district, are the heart of the city. There are several districts in the city that most people in the city have not ever been to. There are 26 districts in Louisville, and I know there's at least a couple that I've never spent any significant amount of time in. But everybody comes to District 4. Everybody comes to the Yum Center, 4th Street Live, Nulu, etc. That we are essentially both, literally and figuratively, we are at the heart of the city.
It's a big income district for Louisville too.
Absolutely.
A lot of money spent down here. So yeah. So it's currently, I know you mentioned this earlier, Barbara Sexton-Smith has a seat, and she's decided not to run again. What do you think about the job that she did?
So the thing about Barbara Sexton-Smith is, you can never take away from the fact that she is a really intelligent person, incredibly gifted fundraiser, and an incredibly smart, policy-minded person. There were times where I didn't feel like she exercised the political bravery that someone perhaps should, but in general, she did a great job speaking to neighborhoods, speaking to the needs of people in the community, especially relative to some of the other people on the council. As far as homelessness goes, she was a leader on the council, and again, no one can take that away from her. She more than anybody else, I think she really has tried to establish an identity around District 4 itself. She always says, "Welcome to District 4" when she starts a thing, and nobody until she started doing that, nobody really thought of the district as their home. I might say I live in Shelby Park, or I live in Nulu, or I live in Butchertown, or whatever, but no one would say, I live in District 4, and that's something that sort of sense of pride and place is something that Barbara, I think, brought to that role.
Which has led to what 6 Democrats are running, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Are there any non-Democrats running the
There are no Republicans in their primary. So this primary is basically the general as far as it's concerned. We had 7, one person dropped out. There might be actually another person dropping out, but right now we're at 6.
Yeah, I didn't see any Republicans, any kind of libertarians or anything running. So, now have you been able to do any kind of polling or anything? How do you feel like you're sitting right now? Do you feel like you have a good shot at this?
There's no polling. I could possibly do some polling. We only have a handful of voters. We know this is a district that has a lot of people, but a lot of people who feel like the political process is not made for them, and so the number of voters in this district is actually quite small compared to the number of people who live here. So a Democratic primary in our district typically only has about 4,000 voters max. So we could possibly poll every single one of those voters and see, where they're leading right now. I could say that from my perspective, I feel like the wind's at my back. I'm not the establishment candidate, but I am a candidate who I think has probably raised, if not more money than anybody, a significant amount of money. I have a lot of support from people that I talk to, and there's a great hunger in this city for some transformative change, and I think a lot of people see a lot of hope in my campaign for being a representative of that. So with that in mind, we've been able to just blast through our fundraising goals and reach a lot of people with canvassing and materials and media. We have billboards up 12 weeks out. This is the sort of thing that a formidable campaign has to do, and I feel like I'm running a formidable campaign, absolutely.
All right, awesome. So when you're talking to the people from the district, kind of what are the hopes, what they want to see, what are the issues that they're coming to you with?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I'm a teacher, and so the first thing they hear the first thing they say when they hear that I'm a teacher is they want to talk about what's going on in the schools. And I say, well, there's only certain ways the Metro Council really can affect the schools, but people are really eager to talk about the situation in our schools, the many number of issues going on in the schools. So there's that, and there's a way in which as a Metro Council person, especially one who is a teacher, I can provide some sort of insight, some sort of use of that platform to help and sort of guide the way people think about schools. But so there's that. That's why people want to talk to you about schools. In addition, a lot of people want to talk about housing. They want to talk about the homelessness issue, but they also want to talk about the rising rents, which are 2 issues that of course go hand in hand.
We'll get into your platform on that
absolutely.
Here in a minute.
Yeah. So these are the things we want to talk about. They want to talk to me mostly about schools and housing, and then occasionally they want to talk about things about my platform, the Green New Deal. They want to talk about protecting our tree canopy, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, let's break down your campaign a little bit here.
Okay.
First and foremost, I see you're running as a grassroots candidate.
I am, yes.
Not taking any big money?
No big money. Well, I made a pledge, it's called the Homes Guarantee, that I would take no campaign funds from any large developers, any large landlords. I also threw mega churches on that list, because I feel like these are not, it's not to say that all landlords, all large landlords, or all developers, or all mega church leaders are bad people, but I do think that we need to start trying to develop our democracy from below and give more voices to people who don't have this societal megaphone that a mega church or your millions of dollars can give you. So it was a strategic and a moral decision for me to say I'm not going to accept any donations from any large landlords or developers, just for that reason. So far, the average donation on our website on MacBlue is about $34. So we've raised about $15,000 now, with the average contribution, individual contribution is $34.
That's awesome, man. I think that is so important. What I've been telling people for years, for me personally, if a candidate's not grassroots, they can't get my vote, because they're not working for me, they're not working for the people.
Absolutely.
Whether it's intentional or not, once they get that big money, it comes with strings attached. So if you're only taking money from the people, we know you're going to be there working for the people. And
accountable to the people. I mean, that's the part. I think, when you are, putting your future, in the hands of your donors, you are accountable to them. So if those donors are millionaires, you're going to be to some degree accountable to them. If those donors are working class people who are looking for a better world for themselves, you're going to be accountable to them too. Most of my support is coming from, like I said, working class people, coming from committed activists, progressives in the city and elsewhere who want progressive, leftist, and democratic socialist solutions to the problems that we're facing. So, taking money from those people means that I'm accountable to those people, and those people who I have no problem being accountable to, I will answer to, because they are the people whose ideals I share. I'm not always going to see eye to eye with everybody, but I'm going to try to be accountable to the people who who look out for this campaign and who I'm trying to serve in general, whether they donate to the campaign or not.
That's awesome. And I try to point out too, a grassroots candidate, even if there were one out there that I don't agree with, but they're grassroots, if that candidate wins, at least I know that I have a chance to talk to that candidate and they'll hear me out. He might not agree with me, but if he doesn't, it'll be because he doesn't agree with me, not because he's paid not to agree with me. So I would rather take my chance with that. Not saying that I don't agree with you. I do agree with you on most things, but I'm just putting that out there. If they're taking big money, they're not accountable to us, the citizens. So just bear that in mind. So I say on your website, you kind of you go with the democratic socialist policies, progressive policies, as I do as well. So what's attractive about that type of politics to you?
Well, to me, democratic socialism means that we are expanding and intensifying democracy. So I'm a strong believer in that the people should be the ones who decide their fate. And so when I say intensifying democracy, I mean where democracy already exists, we make it stronger. If we already have democracy at the ballot box, well, we want to increase access to voting. We want to fight voter suppression. We want to perhaps institute ranked choice voting, things that give people more choice in their voting and make people more likely to vote. So there's that. Where democracy does not exist already, we want to try to instill it. We want to try to put it there. We want to advocate for tenants associations where there are no tenants associations, neighborhood associations where there are no neighborhood associations. We want to have more co-ops and more community-owned facilities and institutions. So, this is, and then of course we want to increase and expand democracy into more aspects of social life. So, including our actual economy. So, democratic control of the economy being one of many goals of democratic socialism.
You brought up ranked choice voting. That's a huge thing for me. Would you be willing to support that here in the city?
Absolutely. I definitely support ranked choice voting. I don't know if there are any initiatives to get that happening, but like I said, I want voting I want democracy to flourish. And I think that even in a race like this, there are a couple of candidates who, if I weren't running, I would rank 1, 2, 3 or whatever, and I wouldn't want to feel like my vote was wasted on the candidate I agree with more, and then the candidate that I disagree with wholly ends up getting the seat because I voted for the guy who I like a little bit more than the other guy or the lady for the moment.
I know I've been trying to work on ranked choice voting, getting that passed in the state. I haven't found that right candidate yet. So if that goes down the tube, I might, turn to the city and try to find some Metro Council to work on. But one way or another, we're going to make that happen here.
What's funny? The people who have a problem with democratic socialists, they like to throw around examples of autocratic socialists and tyrannical socialists. But me personally, you can't say that I don't believe in democracy. And those of us who are with me are the ones who want to expand democracy, who want to make democracy stronger, who want to institute things like ranked choice voting, and it's actually the more powerful political parties that are most opposed to it because they have less with ranked choice voting. They'll have less of a cudgel to beat people with as far and to keep their voters in line to advocate for sometimes more regressive agendas. So we want ranked choice voting for sure.
Right. Progressives get a lot of bad rap, and I don't think it's fair, but we kind of get labeled as my way or the highway, but really we just want a fair chance. We're not starting on a level playing field, and that's what we're having to deal with. So let's get into some of your policies here. I was looking at your website. You've got a long list of stuff that you're working on.
I'm not very brief don't have a lot. Brevity is not my thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Your details are good, especially when you're in charge. So let's start with the Green New Deal for Louisville. What are your thoughts for that, and why is that important?
Well, so the idea for a Green New Deal in general, of course, is a national campaign, but there are statewide and municipal Green New Deal plans all over the country. The Green New Deal, broadly speaking, is an attempt to address both climate change and also the wealth gap in our society, and the fact that we have lost our union density and our working classes has suffered for it. So nationally and also statewide and municipally, a Green New Deal basically means trying to rebuild our society in a way that combats climate change, which is again the fight of our lives, while also expanding union density, while also providing working class people with quality lives and quality jobs, and while also combating, really historical maladies like environmental racism. So we're trying to do a lot of things at once with this Green New Deal thing. And if you were to Google before I ran this race, Green New Deal for Louisville, you found nothing. There were no hits. No one said they were doing a Green New Deal for Louisville. You Google Green New Deal for Seattle, Green New Deal for Milwaukee, Green New Deal for Denver, Green New Deal for Nashville. Somebody was saying something. So I thought it was pretty notable that none of our politicians or our groups were actually using that language to describe a plan for building this city. So, the idea for a Green New Deal for Louisville is simply just that we want to make the city carbon neutral by 2030. We want to institute increasingly, let's say, hard to meet standards for new construction, increasingly stringent, let's say, standards for old buildings as far as their use of resources, their greenhouse gas emissions, the water usage, etc. So there's that. And the other component is we want to collaborate with the various educational entities in the city, specifically JCPS and JCTC, U of L, etc., in order to train the young people in the city for the necessary jobs that are going to be required in order to make this city and make this world a livable place come 2030. So that's what the Green New Deal is about. It's about doing all that, sort of training people to do those jobs with a focus on looking at our most disadvantaged neighborhoods and really targeting those neighborhoods for the people that we want to train, the work that we want to have done. We want to confront environmental racism while also building a sustainable and livable planet.
One thing I can say after all that is very detailed. I'm very impressed. I talked to people who have run for much larger offices who aren't that detailed, and it's their job to be more detailed than a Metro candidate. So that's very impressive.
I thought I was being general, so thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure you can go further into depth of that. But yeah, with that Green New Deal, something that kind of goes with that is how our public utilities are run.
Absolutely.
So I noticed that you're kind of in favor of public ownership of that.
Yes.
So talk about public ownership and kind of which utilities specifically and why you think that's the way to go.
Well, look, right now we are facing, our LG&E, the electric company here, is right now they are in the middle of a fight that's been going on the past few years regarding building a pipeline through a beloved forest, and that's been that's been a big issue over the past year or so, and it just underscores the fact that our energy policy, especially when we put private corporations in charge of the things that we need to have a functional society, they're not necessarily going to have our best interests in mind when they make their decisions. They might not necessarily have in mind the idea that perhaps this community needs to preserve what forest it has, all of it. And of course they are there to turn a profit, and which doesn't necessarily correspond with, or is not necessarily amenable to, making the world livable, fighting climate change. So if we are to publicly own these facilities, publicly own these utilities, we could possibly have more of a stake and more of a say in how those utilities and how those corporations, the utilities corporations, are run, so that they can benefit our entire community and not just turn a profit for some shareholders who don't even live here.
Okay, so I know that LEED certification is important to you. See where you're kind of wanting to incorporate that going forward. So talk about exactly what that is and why you think we should do that here in the city.
Well, so LEED certification, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, they give a number of, a series of points to score for new construction and also for renovations for old construction. And many of our, across the country, across the world, policies for reaching carbon neutrality are looking to these standards for this construction and renovation in order to have cities have buildings that are carbon neutral, that manage their water resources well, that use different and more sustainable materials in their construction. And so that's what LEED certification does. It gives a score based on all those criteria. And I think that large buildings should be the first to have to fit the gold standard. So they have various standards. There's silver, gold, platinum, and then there's one more. But I think that all new construction of a certain size, and we'll hammer that out, should definitely meet the gold standard. And as the buildings, as we move on, we sort of bring in smaller buildings, but also trying to hit those standards with regard to carbon neutrality, material usage, etc., water usage.
Okay, and just staying on the topic a little bit more, I also saw where you want to restore the Office of Sustainability as well as the Division of Community Forestry. So what do you want to see from those two projects, and why do you think we need those?
Well, we just need them. I mean, these were entities that were somewhat on the chopping block last year. We had a budget shortfall, and in order to really sort of keep up with the rest of the country for our goals of carbon neutrality, we need to take sustainability seriously as a city. So the Office of Sustainability is actually essential. And then community forestry, Louisville Groves has done some really amazing things, growing our tree canopy, and we want to expand that. We want to protect and expand our tree canopy. We know about the heat island effect in Louisville. We know that there's a lot to be done with the air quality, and we all know that how much needs to be done with regard to making our especially in the western part of our city, more green. So expanding our tree canopy, citizen forestry is vital for that.
Okay. A topic that's near and dear to me is our pollinator situation. I don't know how much you've looked into it, but basically a third of our food is we get it because of pollinators.
Yeah, of course.
And we're, our bees, bats, monarch butterflies, all dealing with issues. So when I see Green New Deal, I'm thinking, how can we incorporate protection for them? What do you think about that, as far as like some of the ideas I have are maybe like our parks and our roads where we can plant milkweed and other types of things there. So would your Green New Deal or would your Office of Sustainability be looking into something for pollinators?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we have to manage the lands that we have a little bit better than we do. I mean, we have this beautiful park system. Perhaps we should be planting more wildflowers, trying to attract more butterflies, more pollinators to the lands that we have, and then of course islands and roads, things like that. These things can make a big difference. I have a butterfly bush in my yard, and my front yard, just it's a very small area, and every spring I see pollinators come through that I've never seen before, and there's no reason that we can't and we shouldn't be doing that to build back our population for sure.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to see tackled at a federal or state level, but since they're not doing it, it's kind of up to us to take hold of it, because we cannot afford to lose our pollinators. If we lose a third of our food supply, it's going to cause so much havoc, so many problems, and we just don't need to do that. So, let's flip the script a little bit and move away from that and get on some other topics. So I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but talk about your plans for education in the city.
So, the Metro Council only has a little bit to do with the schools. The JCPS school board is actually, in my opinion, the most progressive legislative body in the state of Kentucky, A, and B, they have a budget that's larger than the city of Louisville budget. So they maintaining the schools is their job. What does matter, though, that the JCPS needs support from Metro Council for is how we deal with having police in our schools. When they put police in schools, they are these SROs, these school resource officers are often city employees, off-duty police, etc. What sort of training these people are getting? How can the Metro Council help instill some sort of sense of equity in how disciplinary issues are dealt with in school, especially when these issues become criminal issues that use our city resources.
Now, how do you feel about the SROs? I know there's a lot of activist groups in the city that are strongly against it, kind of like Surge, Black Lives Matter, and some of those. So where do you stand on it?
What I stand on SROs? Well, so first off, I'm a public school teacher, and I teach at a school that has security. And I can say this: I don't think anybody should be in a school with a gun, period. I think that a gun should be always the last line of defense in any sort of situation. So I think that in general, we don't need armed sentries of the state dealing with our disciplinary issues in schools. So there's that. Do I think that some schools definitely should have permanent security? What does that permanent security look like? How is that permanent security trained? What sorts of efforts are done to ensure that those disciplinary issues are dealt with some sort of sense of racial and social equity? These are the questions that I think are more important than what we call those security people. Now, personally, I teach at a Title I school, and we have a lot of behavioral incidents in our school. Our security is as flawed as our system may be, is still invaluable to handling some of our toughest cases. But what is essential and important is that our security that we use are mostly there to support the students. We pull them out of class, they get a little bit of counseling. I see no reason why we can't expand and make such systems much stronger. Instead of training security guards to be sort of ad hoc counselors to students who are in need or who need some help after they've been in a violent incident or whatever, I see no reason why we should not have more actual counselors in the building handling those jobs, instead of putting that weight onto often these off-duty police officers who are ill-equipped to do that sort of work. So, how do I stand on SROs? I mean, SROs, they're different from place to place. They're different from person to person. Do I think they should have guns? Never. But we can have facilities in our schools that are there to keep the students safe, that can also help support those students who are having an emotionally volatile experience. And I think we should expand the programs that exist for that, and really take as much of that support, those support needs, from these off-duty police officers as possible. These are jobs for trained professionals who are not primarily there to enforce.
Generally speaking, you're kind of looking at more of a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach.
Yeah, I mean, and if you ask me yes or no, do I support SROs? I would say, well, no, I don't support SROs. But that to me is not the question to ask. The question is, how should we respond to volatile or dangerous behavior incidents in schools, acknowledging that they exist, and they do. I deal with this all the time, at my school, and so once you ask yourself that, then we start coming up with some actual real solutions that are uniformly going to be better than we'll put a gun in the hand of a cop and put him in the school. That's the worst idea. It's a stupid idea.
That's an excellent way to look at things. Yeah. So you touched on another topic earlier. Let's get into that. So talk about housing and what's going on in the community, and what we need to do.
So what do we need to do with housing? So there's so much with regard to housing. I mean, these are national problems. A lot of these things. I mean, there are things that are not going to be fixed for Metro Council District 4, try as I might. But what's going on with housing? The same thing's going on everywhere. In Louisville, housing prices are out of control. People are being displaced from neighborhoods at an alarming rate. In District 4, this is especially the case. Some of our neighborhoods are the most ripe for gentrification, or the most gentrifying neighborhoods probably in the state of Kentucky. And not just one of them, but almost all of them are experiencing that. I mean,
like Nulu.
like Smoketown, Nulu, Shelby Park, Russell. These are.
Where's Russell at exactly?
Russell is we're in Russell right now, actually.
Oh.
Russell is just basically west of downtown.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I heard it, but I was never exactly sure where it was.
Well, it's funny because there's all this effort and pride in place stuff with neighborhoods. A friend of mine was saying recently, I never heard anybody say Russell, referring to this neighborhood as Russell, until a few years ago. And I felt the same way. I was like, I grew up in the West End. I grew up in West Louisville, not too far from West Russell, and nobody was calling it Russell back then. At least not that many people I knew were calling it Russell back then. But there's been a very encouraging explosion with regard to housing, an explosion of pride in place in different neighborhoods, and I think we can thank the Center for Neighborhoods for that. And Russell definitely has a real identity at this point. And so when you have a real identity and a real sense of pride in place, it helps facilitate having more neighborhood sense of its own governance. So we have a lot of people in Russell who are neighborhood activists, who are actively fighting the gentrification that's happening here. And we have a lot of people in all the various neighborhoods in the city who have some good ideas about what they think should happen to the neighborhood. And I think that what should we be doing is we should be listening to those people.
And as you said, we're in Russell right now. For those of you watching who haven't been here, this is my first time here, but we're at the Republic YMCA. It's right there at Dixie and Broadway. Thanks to them for hosting us here today. Come check this place out. It's new, it's beautiful, well worth your time. So on your website, you had a couple more things you mentioned. If you have time, get into those real quick. The first of which was you talk about a healthy city. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that?
Well, a healthy city. So, we talk a lot about making our cities safe. And it's the easiest thing in the world to say you want safe cities. But I think that our idea of what a safe city is should be expanded. Like I said before, we can't have a city that is puts more of its resources into trying to imprison people, arresting people, than it does into keeping those people safe from the problem that they're facing in their lives. So when we talk about, and you mentioned earlier, when we have these budget shortfalls, me personally, I think that it's time for us to start looking at, for one, of course, creating other sources of revenue, but also looking to see how we are effectively using the budget that we have to keep people safe. We have a $250 million police budget that I think could possibly use some addressing when it comes to, okay, is this the most effective use of our money? Is this the most effective way to keep our people safe, keep our people healthy? People, our librarians, our first responders, they are all at this point seemingly trained to deal with the homeless population, trained to deal with heroin overdoses, opioid overdoses. These are vital first responders to our community. When we talk about keeping the community safe, we have to include things like, we have to keep the libraries open, for any number of reasons, and that's also, a safe and healthy city is one that reads, of course, as well. But just even for the other roles the libraries play in our society, we have to keep them open and not close them when there's a budget shortfall, and so that we can avoid touching the police budget.
Now let's go from healthy city to from turning Louisville into a solidarity city and not an austerity city.
Okay. So
I told you I looked at this stuff.
So possibility city. That was the catchphrase that Mayor Fisher and others gave to the city of Louisville when times were a little bit more, things were flourishing a little bit more, and they brought a lot of tourism to the city and so forth. And the idea was they're going to bring people in, and they're going to have this beautiful progressive city, or whatever they were suggesting, that these were things that were possible, And then what actually happened was the possibilities sort of ended. We had these budget shortfalls, and all of a sudden the first response was, well, we're no longer a possibility city, we're an austerity city. We're going to make things leaner. We're going to shut down libraries. We're going to take an ambulance off the street. This is an austerity city, not a possibility city. And so us at Louisville DSA said, well, we don't need an austerity city. And we know that what's possible in this city can only be possible through a solidarity. So we said we need a solidarity city. That's a city that does the best by its working class population, that forms partnerships all throughout the community for the sake of the community's growth. So we are advocating for a solidarity city, one that is not afraid to say that we support labor, one that's not afraid to actually develop in a way that is responsible to its most precarious living citizens. We want a solidarity city, a city that benefits the many and not the few.
And for those who aren't sure, why austerity is a bad thing or what that's about, look up the Grenfell Towers in London. This was 2017, 2018, I believe. Just look into that and what caused that, and that's what we don't want, and that's the direction we do not want to go. So, of course, everybody that knows me knows I'm a net neutrality guy, so I'm going to have to ask you about it when any candidate comes on. I'm trying to push this in the state as well, but it's not really getting too far. So I've kind of been talking to some Metro Council and some of the mayor's staff about municipal broadband.
Okay.
How up are you on net neutrality and municipal broadband? Are you familiar with it?
I'm very up on net neutrality. I don't know anything about municipal broadband. I mean, I know that there was an effort, the Google Fiber effort, but I don't know anything about what's going on.
Yeah, that was different. That was just another competitor coming in. But the municipal broadband will basically mean that we as a city own it, so it would be a city utility.
Well, I mean,
with net neutrality built into the contract.
The internet is a utility. It's a utility that I think that people should start treating as a general fact of life. Yes, municipal broadband, if I understand it correctly, seems like a good idea.
Well, it's something I've been pushing. I know it's very expensive. It's not something we could do tomorrow, but I feel like the Metro Council needs to set a goal, either 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Say, hey, we need to have this done in this amount of time. Let's set the money aside every year and make this happen. So would that be something maybe you could get behind if you were on the council?
I'll look into it. Like I said, I'm for public ownership of utilities, and I think at this point we can't treat the internet like it's a luxury. As a necessary fact of life. That we should be monitoring and providing to people like we provide water and like we should be providing healthcare.
Now, me personally, I think getting rid of net neutrality is our modern day book burning, our equivalency, digital books.
I mean, you're right. I mean, this is the equivalent of probably actually several thousand Library of Alexandria fires. Right? I mean, if people can't can't fully access that which is on the internet, then you are essentially keeping them away from the vast realm of human knowledge.
Right. You can't make good decisions if you're not educated.
Absolutely.
So is there any part of your platform that I missed that you'd like to talk about?
Anything from my platform, you've really looked into a lot of it. I will say this, there's a lot to a lot of these issues. We talked a little bit about public safety and police reform. There's more and more to that stuff. I mean, I didn't really talk about how I think we should really abandon the policy of these extensive, the way in which we are giving tax cuts to corporations for moving in. I think that's something we should be addressing. There's a lot more to that we have to talk about, a lot more to fix in the city than we have time to talk about right now.
Yeah, okay. So then we'll wrap it up with this. Well, first of all, you have District 4 has a debate coming up. Is that correct?
We have forums. I don't think we have officially debates. I'm not really sure what that's going to entail, but there's a few forums coming up. There's one on I think the 16th.
That's the 7 o'clock one?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, I will try to get to that, people. With so many candidates, I'm going to try to get to that, but it kind of conflicts with the end of my work, and I might not be able to get off in time. But what I'll do that day is I'll take my stuff to work, and if I get off in time, I'll head straight there, and I'll get that all on camera for you guys. But yeah, go ahead and talk to the camera and tell people of District 4 why they should vote for you, and then when you're done, let them know how to find you online.
Well, yeah, so basically, I'm trying to transform the city in a very progressive way. I know that District 4 is the heart of our city, that we can lead from District 4 to really create some really beautiful things in the city, trying to really reconfigure the way that we govern. We want to govern from below. We want to develop more democracy, more transparency, more participatory budgeting. These are all things that hold near and dear to my heart, building our democracy and making our democracy stronger for the working class in the city and for everybody. So if you like what you heard, if you want to get a new deal for Louisville, if you've given any thought to how exactly we're going to get ourselves out of this budget shortfall mess that we've created without cutting further resources, please look into me. My website is bell4louisville.com, Bell for Louisville. That's my name on Twitter, on Instagram, etc. Look into me, and May 19th is the primary.
Robert, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a great conversation, really in-depth views that you have there, and I know that you could get much more in-depth than you have. So you seem like an excellent candidate to me. People, get out and vote. Vote for Robert. He deserves your vote. Check him out. Share this out to anybody you know in the district, anybody you think is going to vote, anybody needs that information. As usual, I am a small independent channel. Not for profit, but you guys can still help me out. I don't need the donations, but I do need the likes, the shares, the comments. That's what builds my algorithm. That's what helps me get this message out as I try to be the megaphone for the community here. So press all those appropriate buttons: like, follow, share, subscribe. You know what to do. Until next week, I'll work on lining up another interview for you guys. Always think critically.